Greetings, everybody. This is Dr. Ray Lindley from Array Global Educational Services, and welcome again to these monthly workshops that we've been doing throughout the year. Hopefully they've been of help to you, and please remember that they're all recorded on our Facebook page if you ever want to review any of the workshops, just as this one is. This will be the last workshop that we will do for this academic year, but please watch for us in the fall with announcements of the next workshops, the titles, and who the presenters will be. And so if you have some suggestions for workshops that would be helpful to you for next year, please feel free to contact one of us so that we can make sure we put that in our schedule. I'm really privileged today to have three other wonderful people with me. Of course, you all know Dr. Jacob Francom, who's the Associate Executive Director of Array Global. And the other man you've seen before, and he's part of the founding board of Array Global, Dr. Salam Noor, and he will be presenting also today. And finally, Mr. Khaled Mohamed. Khaled is director of a school in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, and has worked with us for several years now, and we'll all be presenting today. But before we begin, Dr. Jake would like to make some announcements that I think are very exciting, and he'll be telling us about those.
Thanks, Dr. Ray. And first off, I just want to tell everyone happy Eid. I know this is a great time of year to celebrate, to get together as families. And we want to be part of that with you in celebration. And speaking of celebration, we have a couple people we wanted to recognize today in our workshops. Our first is Mr. Omar Amin from the Al Faisaliya International School in Saudi Arabia. He is our Administrator of the Year, and what an outstanding individual in person. And he really deserves this recognition and this nomination that he has had. So congratulations, Mr. Omar. Also, we'd like to recognize Mr. Mohammed Kamal from the Al Alson International Schools in Riyadh. Again, huge congratulations. What an outstanding individual and teacher that he does so much to get students involved and engaged, especially during this COVID time. He has worked tirelessly to help students stay engaged in learning. So congratulations to him. Another thing that we wanted to announce is many of you and your students have been involved in our science fair. And we had a ton of students be part of this from all over the world. And we had several different judges judging these students in various grade levels. And just wanted to tell you and your students how much we were impressed and grateful for participating. And we're just glad that we could be part of that, that's great activity. So many students engaged in learning. And after going through all these different entries, the one who was nominated as the grand prize winner was Miss Bana Hassan Marie. She's from the Al Nadha and National School in the United Arab Emirates. We congratulate her. And if you haven't seen the video of her and some of the other winners, please go to our Facebook page or our YouTube page. Some of them are just outstanding and very entertaining too. We had a lot from the lower grades, from the primary grades, all the way up through high school. And some of the lower grades were just so cute and fun to watch. And then the high school grades were just so well done and organized and such a high caliber of science projects. So congratulations to all those who participated. Everyone received a certificate, and then we had obviously a couple who were able to be our grand prize winner and recognize them here now. So just a few other housekeeping items. We wanted to make sure that if you have any questions or comments, please put it in our chat. We are going to have time at the very end of this workshop to answer some of your questions. So you can add those questions in there now or when we start that question and answer session. And then also at the end of this workshop, we're going to post a form that you fill out to get your certificate. It will take us until about Wednesday or Thursday to get those certificates out. If you haven't received a certificate by Friday, please email us and we'll make sure that we get you one. We have people on Facebook, we have people on our Zoom chat, and then we have people who watch this on YouTube also. So welcome everyone, and it's back to you, Dr. Ray.
Good, thank you very much. The purpose of the workshop today is to talk about really what we've just been through. This year is behind us now, fortunately, or almost behind for some of the people. And there's been a very, very difficult year. However, sometimes in the most difficult of circumstances, we learn some valuable lessons. And that's what we want to talk about today is in light of the fact, and we could talk for a long time about all the problems we've had, but we all recognize the several problems, but we want to make this a very forward thinking opportunity for all of us. So we've titled this workshop, What Schools Have Learned and How the Pandemic Has Changed Education, because we all have to agree it's different and it probably will be different from here on. So the first presenter today will be Dr. Salam Noor. Dr. Salam and I have worked together for many years. We both used to work at the Department of Education. He was my boss. He never lets me forget that. We're great friends, and we have a great relationship, but I promise you there aren't too many people in the United States who have the educational credentials that he has. And he's going to begin by talking about what has happened this year in the area of curriculum and instruction and how it might help us change to do a better job in the future.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Ray, for the introduction. And I want to say greetings and Eid Mubarak to everyone that has joined us today. And thank you for joining us. And I know you're going to get a wonderful wealth of information from our colleagues here on this webinar today. And I want to thank my distinguished colleagues for inviting me to join them and to be a part of this webinar. So I think we're going to keep our comments brief to allow for some questions and some discussion at the end. But the one thing that I think we have learned with regards to curriculum is that curriculum really, really matters. We have a handout that Dr. Jake will share with you later in the presentation that really underscores the importance of what we call the instructional core, and Dr. Ray will speak to that as well. And the instructional core is the relationship between content, teacher, and student. And I believe the pandemic has really tested that whole notion of the instructional core, because the first thing that I know from the schools that I work with here in the state of Oregon and others was our content. What do we do with our curriculum? How do I deliver the entire curriculum in a very condensed amount of time? Because many schools shifted to a hybrid model or complete distance learning, as we had in our state and many states around the country, and I'm sure the same happened with you. So we shifted to distance learning, and we had to learn new skills, new habits, new ways of thinking and organizing curriculum and delivering curriculum. But what we had to be true to the entire time is the quality of the curriculum that we delivered. And I think many teachers realized very quickly that having some base knowledge and of how to organize curriculum becomes really critical. And I think teachers realized very quickly that they may have to forego bits and pieces of their curriculum and focus on the skills that the curriculum was actually intended to teach students. So I want to come back to what I really want to underscore for you. And when we discussed this presentation as a team here, the thing that kept coming back, that we kept coming back to was the standards, was the accreditation standards. Because if nothing else, this pandemic has taught us to be flexible on the one hand. It has taught us that necessity is the mother of invention, so to speak. And third, that we have to be prepared for anything at all times. So as a teacher, for me, being prepared means that I know my curriculum, I have it organized based on the standards that the accreditation process actually recommends. I know how to engage with my students to assess where they are. Sometimes we take it for granted that we'll know very quickly where students are. And I think we had a tough time in this pandemic trying to figure out where our students are relative to where we left off last year. And where are they relative to what we're actually delivering, what we're teaching them. So I think, if you go back to the standards that we have that are an integral part of the accreditation process in the curriculum and instruction section, there's some basic fundamental reminders relative to curriculum, and that is the importance of assessing where students are. And this is not something that we do just at the beginning of the year. This is ongoing. This is a formative process with which we engage students and learn and understand where they are academically and how they're progressing relative to the curriculum and the standards. The other thing that we learned is that we have to adjust our curriculum according to students' needs. And it's easy to do that in a classroom where you have everybody there with you and you have a good sense of what you taught last week, what you taught the previous day, et cetera. I think the pandemic has really challenged us to think differently about how do we assess where our students are? How do we actually define their needs? How do we engage the students in this process? With the family component during the pandemic, I think we learned how to engage the family and the parents relative to what students are learning. So our curriculum is no longer this just fixed body of content, this fixed body of knowledge. The curriculum becomes the experience that students are having relative to the learning process that we want them to have. And I think it's really important as we come out of this pandemic and go back to our classrooms that we maintain those lessons that we learned, that students are different and the content that we have may be constant, but we have to differentiate it, we have to adjust it. Sometimes we have to slow down and go back and reteach. We have to have different assessment tools. I mean, that's what teachers actually have told me is the biggest challenge they have, is they don't have the luxury of engaging students personally and really having conversations with them to determine where they are relative to their learning. So we have to really creative in terms of how we approach learning and teaching with students. Differentiation, in my opinion, is truly the biggest takeaway from this pandemic. And the reason I say that is because we actually got to see our students in different ways. And we got to look at our content in different ways. And through distance learning in particular, we were able to figure out fairly quickly who's grasping the content, who's on track, and who is behind, and who's really having a difficult time just engaging the teacher in this new medium of learning. So differentiation became really critical in terms of working with the entire class. And in our case here, sometimes actually class size increased as a result of the pandemic because we had to maximize teachers' time. So teachers were not able to teach multiple sections. We had to break students into cohorts. So it complicated a lot of things, but differentiation became really essential to ensure that we have to engage students in their learning. And the differentiation happened through individualized instruction, small group instruction, teaming of students to work on specific projects. Ironically enough, project-based learning became really critical throughout this pandemic, because that was another way of organizing our curriculum, our content, and delivering it to students in compartmentalized ways, is to have small groups of students working on projects relative to science content, social studies content. I currently teach a university class, and I will tell you, it's challenging for me as well as a teacher, and I have to think differently about my content. And what I realized going through the process myself is that I have to forego some of the content. I have to actually think about the most important concepts and ideas and knowledge that I want them to have. And then I want them to have skills. So no matter what class they take next, I want them to have good communication skills, good writing skills, analytical skills, collaboration skills. And it's really interesting because those are the things that we often forget because we're so focused on the specific content, the instructional materials that we have to deliver. So I've shifted my teaching and my quizzes. I used to give actually 2 midterms in my class. Now I give 7 quizzes, and I actually leave them open. I feel like now it's the students have to do the work, But that is something that I learned through this process, that all of my students don't learn the same way. All of my students are going to embrace this content in different ways. I have to work on pacing. Sometimes I will actually group them together purposefully because I know how they're going to be able to help each other. Sometimes I focus primarily on skills and reuse the content to make sure that they've grasped those skills. The research, the analytical thinking, the self-advocacy, the resourcefulness, all of those things become really important. So my advice to us, and I'm trying to keep track of I'm almost up to 10 minutes, and I'm going to stop here in a minute. So I've touched on a lot of things, and the one thing that I would underscore relative to curriculum is we have to be prepared. We have to have our standards organized. We have to have our instructional materials very well organized and aligned to the standards. We have to have different types of assessments available to us that we use to gauge where students are relative to their learning. And the takeaway is that those things are really important in a traditional setting. The use of technology is something that we cannot forget. So I know you'll hear more about technology, but the one thing that I've had to get used to very quickly is different platforms, different tools, how to access information, how to convey that information. So I think as we go forward, we have to think about content and pedagogy, and I think we have to think about new tools and different ways for delivering the curriculum. And I've always told teachers, don't get stuck on your curriculum, because students can always look up that content afterwards. The question is, can they find it? If they want to go back and look for it, can they find it? Can they do something with it? Can they apply the skills that you taught them in your class? Communication, analysis, writing, research, interpretation, advocacy, collaboration. When I look at my own children, those are the things that impresses me about their education, not whether they can recite a passage from a textbook or tell me what chapter it came from. Conceptually, are they able to articulate the curriculum and the purpose of the curriculum? The key is engagement, engagement, engagement. Your curriculum on its own is really not relevant if the students are not engaged, if the students don't understand the purpose of it and the value of it, and if students don't see relevance to future application, not just current application. You have to think about future applications. I always tell my students, I'm teaching you how to do research. I'm teaching you how to write. I'm teaching you how to communicate with me. The first thing I tell them is that you have to be your own advocate. That all I ask from you is communication, follow through, and timeliness. And I know they're going to remember a lot of the things I'm teaching them in this class, but if they move forward and they've learned to communicate, to have follow through and be accountable relative to timeliness, at least, I believe that is a success. Anyway, we have a lot of information to share with you. I apologize. I may have taken an extra minute or two, but I look forward to our dialogue later on. Dr. Ray or Dr. Jake, I don't know who I'm supposed to send it back to.
Just a quick emphasis on something that you mentioned. Well, two actually. Number one, I think I heard you say that teachers have to be in great command of the whole area that will be taught, not just today's lesson.
Right.
Because if they have that, they can motivate students. And if they have that, they can pick out those things in today's lesson that really matter to the whole issue. That's one comment. And the other comment, and Dr. Jake and I talked about this the other day, read a quotation, and you reminded me of education is what happens after what you have been taught has been forgotten. Get that? Education is what happens after what you have been taught has been forgotten. So that's great. Thank you, Salam. Khaled, we're ready for you now, my friend. Khaled has been with us for several years now, one of our great supporters and great educators. And Khaled, we're really pleased to have you talking about technology, what has happened with it, what we've learned, and what we're going to do.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ray, for being a member of this webinar. First of all, happy Eid to everyone. hoping that you already enjoyed your Eid vacation. Actually, to talk about technology during the pandemic, I would like to say that the teaching landscape is rapidly changing, especially during the time of the pandemic. Technology has had, let me say, a good impact on all stakeholders. For example, digital technology played an effective and significant role as it has enabled teachers to teach their learners at a distance using different tools for pedagogy and education. Before we start clarifying, I would like to ask, why do all stakeholders feel comfortable despite having a new experience? Before we discuss the answer, I'd like to say that all stakeholders have showed remarkable, great, and outstanding resilience. They had great experience to demonstrate their work through technology. And I would like to talk about the three sides of the educational triangle. First, let's talk about the teachers. Teachers, in the past, we used to ask the questions, have you used technology effectively? This was the regular question for teachers. However, immediately after the pandemic, the concept of using technology has completely and rapidly changed. That's why intelligent and experienced teachers explained the educational material through technology. This was amazing enough to attract the learners. It broke the boredom, as we could notice that the students used to sit for so many hours in front of their computer screens. They got bored. The teacher could overcome, could resolve, could break the boredom that the students might feel, especially they used to sit, as we have clarified, in front of their computers for so many hours. In addition, teachers use different programs and different resources to differentiate. They use different resources to evaluate their students, because student evaluation has been so accurate during technology use or during the use of technology. Based on the evaluation made by the teachers to evaluate the students' performance, the students' understanding of the lessons, they could have accurate data. These let me say, this analysis could help the teachers to develop their intervention plans for the struggling students, surely and definitely based on the accurate results. Then, this is concerning the teachers. They have different resources. They use the resources to differentiate, as Dr. Salam has just clarified the importance of differentiation, whether differentiation to the content, differentiation to the process they use, or differentiation to the product itself. We come to the learners. We could notice that learners, doubtless, they, at the very beginning of the experience, they were afraid. They asked themselves how they get their learning. They were unable to know. Later on, they were comfortable by the effective use of technology made by the teacher that made it easy for them to get their learning and to understand, to be able to evaluate their understanding of the lesson through the technology, different resources that the students already have got, through the different activities made by the teachers to motivate the students and to get them engaged actively and effectively to the learning process. Also, the students could receive accurate feedback from the teachers about their performance. This feedback helped them to set their levels and to plan with their teachers if they need more intervention classes or not. This concerning the students. Now they are familiar with the experience of already, and they got actively engaged in the learning process through distance learning, actively and effectively by the effective use of technology. Now we come to the third factor, the third side of the educational triangle, the parents. In the past, we did our best as educators to motivate the parents to be more engaged in the educational process. But during the pandemic, the parents have become essential partners with the school in the educational process. They used to attend the sessions with their kids. They used to be aware of what happened during the daily sessions as they used to attend now we could see that some parents have become experts in evaluating the educational process, in evaluating the classroom management, in evaluating the teachers' instruction because of their attendance with their kids. Accordingly, parents can participate well in the curriculum analysis. We can receive their feedback, and it will participate in the curriculum analysis for the next year because their observations have become essential part of the curriculum analysis and to the decision makers in our schools. We can have satisfaction survey. It's advisable for schools to have satisfaction surveys for the parents, and I could say this will be so beneficial for the school to build on for the next year. This is the first point I'd like to talk about the use of technology. The next point, we can talk about the power of online learning and the use of technology in the classroom. All of us could notice that distance learning through technology has had power on the learning and the teaching process. We have a lot of advantages by using technology, and the most important lesson we could notice regarding the power of online learning is that it enabled our students to learn effectively and safely as well. They are attending at home, observing the teacher, participating with him in a safe way to avoid any, let me say, bad events concerning the pandemic. Moreover, students can receive their learning anywhere, and this is one of the benefits of distance learning. They can learn anywhere, at home or this room or the other room. They are free to attend anywhere. Only they should have a strong internet connection. We could notice also that all stakeholders can have access to a variety of resources, as Dr. Salam has clarified, the resources by which all stakeholders can learn easily. The teacher used the resources for instruction, for differentiation. The students use the instruction resources for understanding, for participating, for evaluating their understanding of the lesson, for having more knowledge that will participate and enhance their skills. However, schools should have a well-developed program that need innovative and easy to use e-learning tools to succeed. Schools should plan which platform will be used. It will help the school to achieve their technology plan. All the programs in the technology plan will lead to the success of the school's programs and educational process. Also, we could notice that schools are able to provide more blended learning with the use of technology. In the past, when we have face-to-face teaching, teachers have a variety of teaching strategies. They can have discussions, variety of practice, videos to make it easy for the students to understand, to differentiate. This is what we have learned through the implementation of blended learning. We could notice positive points during the pandemic that a lot of schools used the blended learning successfully. It's very important to blend our learning, of course, and it improves the ability to have personalized learning. As we know, each student must find his needs. All schools do their best to have personalized learning. They seek each single student's needs. He must have and find these needs at school. Through the variety of technology tools, we can provide each single student with his needs. As a result, the students will be able to evaluate his understanding through these activities delivered by different technology or technological tools. Also, the teachers, through the blended learning, can differentiate. They can make knowledge easy for the learners. Students can write down. Also, we have a lot of modern techniques to get the students more engaged with their teachers. The students, for example, the students can write down their questions on the platform, and the teachers, when they see, when they read, they will write down the answers, and the students can receive actively and effectively a feedback from the teacher about his answers, about his performance. In this case, the students will improve his level through the feedback received from the teachers.
Great.
Also,
thank you, Khaled. Thank you, Khaled. I think we better move on because we have only so much time, but I think that a lot of the points that you're making will be summarized in the handout that we're going to be giving at the end. So thank you. I think we all understand the need for really a good understanding of how technology can help us. And actually that leads well into Dr. Jake talking about the emergency management plan that we really have learned that we need to really have. So Dr. Jake, talk to us about that. And especially when we're talking about how we have to put things together, we have to put technology plan together also.
Yeah, Ray, Dr. Ray, thank you for that segue, because that's exactly what I was thinking when Mr. Khaled was talking about an instructional plan. We need to make sure that we have an emergency management plan in place. And I think schools around the world have started to reevaluate their emergency management plans. And Dr. Ray and I have been into many different schools, and in a lot of these schools, the emergency management plan is not very important to them. They don't see it as something that needs to be updated or practiced. But this COVID pandemic, I think it's really brought to light the need for having an emergency management plan that's not only well developed and well outlined, but it's also communicated to all the stakeholders, and that there's professional development, that people know what kind of emergencies could happen in their school. Many schools that we've gone into, they say, oh yeah, we have a plan and it's only for fire. Well, there's so many different types of emergencies. Now everyone's emergency management plan is going to be solely focused on how to best deal with distance-based learning because of a pandemic. But as you get together as your teams, as you get together with administration, you need to get together and talk about specifically any kind of emergency that could happen. If you're a place where there's tornadoes or hurricanes, earthquakes, obviously you're going to have something in there about pandemic and fire. But this is bringing to light how we need to be prepared for any type of situation that may come our way. And in order to best prepare for that, we need to make sure that administrators have the tools that they need to lead a school through any kind of challenge that they may have, and that they're able to train the staff members to make sure that they know what to do specifically in any kind of situation that comes their way, and it needs to be communicated. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about is that we found out in this pandemic is that we need to have contingency plans. We need to have a plan B for almost anything. And as we start to plan and we train, we need to keep in the back of our mind that we need to plan and train for anything, a plan B, because if the one way doesn't work, we need to start going down the other way. And so everyone is prepared for any kind of eventuality that comes our way. And that's in our indicator 4.10. And that's what we come in and look at when we're doing the accreditation. We want to make sure that you are ready and prepared for any kind of eventuality. So Dr. Ray, that was kind of a snippet. Again, it's going to be outlined in the handout that we provide to everyone.
Great. And then I want to talk a little bit about maybe one of the most critical areas that was not addressed during the pandemic. And it's one that I think hit many educators square in the head. And that's the idea of relationships, student relationships. That's one of the things that is so critical in schools, how they interact with each other, how they interact with teachers, how the parents and the families interact with the school, etc. These relationships were very strained. In fact, here in the United States, we have several indications of students who became depressed. Unfortunately, there were some issues of suicide because of lack of relationships. These relationships that are developed in schools are so critical. And if I can encourage every teacher who's listening to this today, and every teacher who might ever listen to this or ever work, build relationships with your students and try to have at least one contact with each student each day. If it's no more than saying, "Hi, Khaled, how are you today?" That's contact. And they need to learn to talk with each other as much as possible. Put your groups together, have some group work so that they can talk with each other. Sure, they're talking about the lesson, but they're talking with each other. So that's important. But they also, we have found that schools provide a good safety net for students that many didn't realize. And we've been in many, many schools, not only here in the United States, but in other parts of the world, where students often feel their greatest feeling of home is at school. Think about that. They feel more comfortable at school for various reasons. And so the safety net that we can provide, making students feel you are welcome here, make sure that students feel that, and that they feel that even though this isn't the home where they sleep, they are comfortable being there. Then the other thing that will help is maybe an extra emphasis next year on the importance of co-curricular activities, things outside the classroom. All of these are important. Labs that they might work in, community service possibly, field trips, clubs, after-school activities, sports, etc. These things all help students feel a part of something. And students might be reached through a club feeling part of the school, then they might not better than they might be reached in a classroom in the school. So that's another thing that I hope that we all understand. And finally, as teachers and educators, all of us need to be open to the feelings of uncertainty that will be expressed by students. They don't fully, in all cases, get the grasp of what has just happened in our world with the pandemic. And they might be a little bit frightened by it. Can this happen again? Will my grandparents get it? Will I get it? What will happen if it goes big in our community? And we know that in some of the countries, it's bigger now than it used to be. Fortunately, here in the United States, the vaccines have been very, very widely distributed. And so that's relieving a lot of the angst of families here in the United States. But be ready for the fact that your students might be somewhat still intimidated. Feel free to talk with them about it. Feel free to let them know that you really do care and that we're all in this together and we're going to help each other together. So those are some specific things about dealing with students and how we might be doing differently next year. I want to jump back to something Dr. Salam said. Sometimes, and I heard him say almost these same words, the curriculum isn't as important as what you do with it, as what you make students feel, because they will learn. I always learn better and I always learn more if it means something to me. And I think your students are just like this, so be sure to connect that. The final area we're going to talk about today, and that's the role of administrators, teachers, parents, and students. They've all changed. Dr. Salam, Ms. Khaled, Dr. Jake, me, we've all talked about the fact, hey, things have changed. They're never going to be the same, but hopefully we've learned some important lessons. So I guess the first question I ask this panel here is, how do you think the role of parents is going to be different after this year? Now, remember, some parents came into this happily. Oh, wow, I get to be part of this. And some of it came in reluctantly thinking, oh my goodness, I thought that's what we paid teachers to do. What have we learned about the role of parents in the operation of schools as a result of this year? Anybody?
Well, I'll jump in because, you know, when we work with parents in our schools, we really cover the continuum. I work primarily with public schools, and students that come to public schools are from different socioeconomic backgrounds. We have really affluent schools. We have really poor schools, if you will. The education is the same, but the students are different. And that is a wonderful thing. We celebrate that and we work with them and meet them where they are. But what we also realized through this process, that parents are different too. And parents have different needs and they engage schools in different ways. And some parents are really eager to engage schools and advocate for their kids. And some parents are afraid to engage schools because they don't know how, they don't have the tools. What I believe has been really powerful as a result of this pandemic is that parents got more involved in their children's education, because in many instances, the parent became the teacher because the kids were at home learning at home. So typically parents attend to the emotional needs of their children. That's what they pay attention to. Is my kid happy? Is my kid depressed? Is my kid angry? Is my kid frustrated? Now they have a better understanding, in my opinion, why their student, why their child is happy, angry, engaged, not engaged, frustrated. So I think we have an opportunity now to emphasize the role of parents being the first teacher. So this is what we do with elementary level parents in particular. Actually, in kindergarten and preschool, we say to the parent, you are the first teacher. But as kids go on in school, that involvement lessons gets less and less and less. I think we have an opportunity to engage parents now in their teachers' education more directly, because they've been involved. They had to get involved. So I think on the parent side in particular, let's not go back to the way it used to be, where you called the parent when you needed to. Let's have this be a partnership and have parents be actively involved in the school culture, school climate, school and curriculum design, which is part of the accreditation process too. So for us, it's not a stretch. We look for parent engagement and parent involvement. So thank you.
Great. Anybody else on the role of parents? I want to jump into the role of students really quick. Anybody else have something to say on parents?
I'd like to add here, Dr. Ray, my experience with the parents during the pandemic. In the past, if we compare between what happened in the past and during the pandemic time, in the past we used to call the parents, please, we need your support. Your son must study at home. But during the pandemic, the image is completely different. They communicate with the teachers. We attended with you, and we could notice our kids' performance, and we need your support with us. So the image is completely different, but they are highly engaged with the teachers and good, positive communication with the teachers through the pandemic time.
And we need to emphasize that, Khaled. We need to say this is important. Jake, did you have anything to add?
No, I think everything was covered.
Okay, I want to talk about the role of students. I think Dr. Salam got into this, and I've been reading some of the comments from some of you. Students are anxious to come back to school. They missed it. Even though they might complain about it from time to time, they're saying, wow, we really missed something. Anything else on the role of students, how it's probably changed because of the pandemic?
Dr. Ray, I can talk about that a little bit because I'm one of the fortunate schools in the world in the United States that has been in pretty regular operation since August when school came back. And it was a different type of feeling with students and with parents. They were much more appreciative to be back. The amount of complaints were considerably down this year because people were just so happy to be back. And I think students' performance was up too. But I was so impressed with students because they were able to rise to this challenge because there was a lot of rules and policies in place to keep everyone safe. And there was very, very little complaining. And I think we need to build that resiliency into our students. And I think we need to realize how resilient and strong our students are in facing any kind of challenges. And I think we need to foster that a little bit more among our students to help them realize, hey, they can overcome these struggles. We're all overcoming it as a society, as a world, and they're playing their part. And so I've just been really, really impressed with our students and the flexibility that they've been able to provide as they're learning.
Yeah. If I may add to that, Dr. Ray, just to build on what Dr. Jake just said, this is something that our students told us. Don't treat us like we're broken. Don't treat us like we've been a victim because of this pandemic. And also look at some of the learning that we did, because the learning wasn't in school. It was at home. It was in a different setting. But it's really interesting. I think our respect and appreciation for students should really grow as a result of this experience. Dr. Jake used the term resilience. I think they have been absolutely resilient. And I think we should recalibrate what students can do. And I used the term agency early on. I think we have to give students agency. And agency means give them some control, give them some self-advocacy, give them some power to lead their own education, because what they have endured has been absolutely remarkable, and we can learn from them as educators.
I think that's been obvious too, that we have found that students have endured. They've somehow lasted this better than the adults, I think, in many cases. The adults get frustrated because we think it should be this way, that way, whatever. And students have just said, hey, listen, we're going to make the best of it. Anything else on the role of students? I'd like to jump to another important area. And we've already talked about the role of teachers, but let's talk about the role of administrators. I think one thing we've learned in the pandemic is the need for positive support from administrators to the teachers. Positive support. We could talk all day about good administrators, bad administrators, and we're going to take what we get. But we need to emphasize to any administrators who are here that we need to have positive support, understanding what the teachers are facing, the issues they're facing. There's probably no job harder in the world, and I know I'm very prejudiced in saying this, there's no job harder in the world than being a teacher, because you hold the future of all of these kids in your hands. And so I wanted to talk about the role of administrators. We'd like to jump ahead because we just have a few minutes left, and we'd like to just give opportunity. I've noticed some questions have come in on the chat. One of them, Khaled, was, what do you do when parents don't have the money for computers and technology? Do you have a suggestion on how they can handle that?
We support them. Here, the Ministry of Education gave the parents the chance to come to school, but most parents didn't prefer to do that, expressing that they have all their needs at home, so no need for them to come to the school, but they provided their kids with all they need for the educational process. So we didn't face that the parents didn't have the internet connection, for example, for their kids. We didn't face this this year.
Dr. Ray, I can address that a little bit, because in my school, where I have my schools, there are students, we have technology for each student. We have a Chromebook, a little laptop for every student, but some people don't have internet connection in the areas we're at. And I think that that's pretty universal throughout the world. There's going to be students that have internet and people that don't. And as a school, we were able to get a little bit more flexible in providing them some paper-based education. And that's where I think the parents' role is so important in supporting their children during that time and helping them do that paper-based education. But I think going back to what we've been talking about, resiliency and just being creative and finding solutions, I think a school would have to sit down, talk about what the challenge is, and come up with a solution. And that's what we have to do when we're faced with any kind of these challenges, no matter what it is, internet, no internet, the school is flooded, or whatever the problem is. We're all bright, intelligent people, get our teams together, figure out what the problem is, and then develop some solutions and then act.
Excuse me, Dr. Ray, one more point concerning this point. Some parents had disconnection, and the school could overcome and resolve this problem by developing and creating YouTube channel. So those parents who might have disconnection, they can go back to the YouTube channel to re-observe and re-watch, re-attend the session that the students lost or missed.
Yeah, and I'm only going to suggest there are other options for families that do not have technology in the home. It might be with a friend's family. It might be in a local library. At least we have those here. So those are all possibilities. We'd like to ask now if yeah, Dr. Jake has already put it on there. Raise your hand with any questions that you have, and we'll try to answer those questions in the last few minutes that we have here.
Dr. Ray, can I make a comment?
Sure.
While we're waiting for questions? And there are two comments. One pertains to administrators and one pertains to parents. I think at times of crises, administrators should shift their mindset from managing to leading. And that is a different way of conducting yourself. So you're being a lot more attentive, you're listening, you're observing, and you're leading and problem solving. And you can still be a manager, you can still be an administrator, but the leading part is really important. And I'll carry this idea to this notion of the parents and the parents that don't have resources. We could ask parents to help other parents. We could ask parents with resources to help other parents that don't have resources. So building on what Dr. Jake said, I think just the leading part is the creative part, the problem solving part. So when we're leading, we can't assume that we have all the answers. So let's ask other people to come in and help us figure out the answers. So if you have a parent committee at your school, why not convene that parent committee and say, we have families that don't have technology. What can we do to help them? And you will be surprised, pleasantly surprised with the solutions that they will come up with.
That reminds me, several years ago, I heard a speaker give this statement. It's very easy to define a leader. A leader is simply a person who has followers. And then he said, he who thinketh he leadeth and hath no followers is merely taking a walk. And so I think that's such an important point. We need to make sure that our students and our families are following with us. There's a question here from Mona. How do you make fair the assessment system in the future? And I'm guessing, Mona, that what you're indicating there is general assessment, or are you talking about the external assessment? General assessment, Dr. Jake, you want to speak to that briefly? How do you make that assessment fair?
I think what do you mean by the general assessment is like a unit assessment or end of the year assessment?
Regular assessments in the classrooms and over a chapter or a lesson or something like that.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what Dr. Salam said at the very beginning. When we're developing the curriculum, we just have to focus on the standards that are most important. Some of these other ones we're just going to have to weed out and not worry about right now, or come back and teach them at another time. I believe Ms. Mona is probably talking about some of the external assessments. And a lot of the external companies, external assessment companies are making some changes, and they've had to adapt, just like schools and administrators have had to, as far as making them fair. I think what a lot of schools that we have seen, they're creating some very robust summer school programs, after school programs to make up for this COVID learning loss. And I think, again, it goes back to the leadership that you were talking about, Dr. Ray. I think putting together, and Dr. Salam, putting together a parent committee, a staff committee, and looking at the problem and figuring out some of these different types of solutions. I think that's what's going to help us out in coming out of this COVID recession, learning recession, this educational recession we've gone through a little bit. Talk together among as a staff member, do a needs assessment, and then start developing some plans for improvement.
And remember too that assessments are indicated or are used to indicate where a student is at this moment. It's not a final deal. It's so I've often said, if you give assessments, standardized assessments or external assessments, to me, a student who grows from the 10th to the 20th percentile is far more significant than a student who grows from the 70th to the 80th. Look at this little kid down here, grew from 10 to 20 because of what you did. That doubled that student's learning, and that's really important. So I think we're going to close this. We try to keep it at an hour meeting. What I want to do is ask Dr. Jake really briefly. We are really interested, if you haven't yet accredited with Array Global, we're really interested in working with you. Dr. Jake, would you just give a very brief description of the accreditation process and invite people to join us?
Absolutely, Dr. Ray, thank you. I think we talked about it each time we do a workshop. We've had a lot of different questions from people. You get onto our website, arrayglobal.org, go under accreditation, fill out the application. We will get in contact with you, have a Zoom meeting with you, your administrative team, and talk about the process, because every school is at a different phase and have different needs too. Fill out the application, we'll get in contact with you and start that accreditation, that assessment of your school, and start planning a visit. To transfer to Array Global, there's no cost, and we still have our golden year discount going on. So instead of $2,500 for the annual fees, it's $2,000. We've been doing online accreditation visits, and we'd be happy to talk to you and work with you on your accreditation needs. And along with that, Dr. Ray, I've included the handout that's what I'm sharing on the screen here, what schools have learned and how the pandemic changed education, and all the different subcomponents that we talked about today, with accreditation process being that foundation of how we're able to work through any kind of challenge that we're faced, whether it's a pandemic or anything else that happens in our community or throughout the world.
You're giving me 30 more seconds, Dr. Jake. I'm typing the quotation here somebody asked me to do before I can.
Yes, there was a question in there that they wanted to hear Dr. Ray's leadership quote again. And I had actually never heard that from you, Dr. Ray. I mean, that one is just a beautiful, beautiful kind of explanation of what leadership is. And I think leaders especially have been challenged during this COVID crisis. Many of them have had to humble themselves because they didn't know specifically the answers for every single situation. And then they've also had to kind of step back and realize, hey, their support staff. They're making sure that everything that goes on in the classroom is happening effectively. Anyway, so that made me think about what really a leader is. Benjamin Hooks, so I'm glad you're able to share that.
And it's on the chat box now. So I know that the chat box is eliminated after this webinar is over. So you might want to copy that if you like it. If you don't like it, that's fine. It's just I always have these wonderful little things. Let me conclude with this. It's been a wonderful year of workshops for us. Please remember that all of the workshops are on Facebook and on YouTube. And all of you who have worked with us today, Khaled, Salam, Jake. Thank you so much. This has been I'm appreciating the comments that are coming. Let me just suggest something for you to be thinking about during the summer. When all the kids are gone and you're just by yourself, think about these rules for happiness. Number one, free your heart from hatred. Take hatred out of your heart. Take disappointment out of your heart. Don't go there. Number two, free your mind from worries. Sometimes we spend so much time worrying about things that don't really have much effect. Number three, live simply. Be very simple in how you work your attitude. Number four, give more to others. And number five, guess what? Expect less. Those are just 5 nice kind of rules for happiness. I was reading something earlier today that if you really want to find happiness, do something for somebody else. Because it's when you see how that affects someone else, it makes you happier also. So give, give, give. If it's no more than just a smile or a telephone call or whatever, give to other people. So thank you all for being with us today, and thank you for attending. Some of you have been at every one of our workshops, and we hope that they've been helpful to you. We'll be anxious to work with you, and thank you, everybody.